It's been a good while since the first episode of Uplink, since we had you back on. And it's been a while since we talked specifically about Battlefront. So let's jump right into it.
Welcome
to Uplink. I wanted to talk, it's been a while since we talked about Battlefront. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the prospects of a Battlefront 3. We're in what? Getting deep into month 3. We're not quite to the third month of Squadrons quite yet, but we're getting there. And there's always talk about future Star Wars games. Any semblance of a whisper of anything new Star Wars and video gaming gets reported. And I wanted to talk to you guys on the podcast. We've got SplitScreen Mark and Danger Cat Ethan. So let's talk about some Battlefront 3. What are you guys' thoughts on the prospects of something along those lines?
I want it.
Yeah, God, yeah, who doesn't? Like,
I know, right?
I think you'd have to be absolutely mad.
I mean, with the popularity of Battlefront, both of them, Battlefront, both series of Battlefronts, we can broaden it through that. But even if you want to be specific about the new Battlefronts, both Battlefront 2015 and Battlefront 2 were both super, super successful, dwarfing the normal games that DICE was creating at the time. Like Battlefield 5 very underperformed generally, and also very underperformed in relation to Battlefront 2. So, I mean, they've got to be thinking about it, right?
I mean, yeah, for sure. Oh, yeah, they have to be thinking about it. The thing people don't realize is that DICE and EA don't own the Star Wars IP. They just have a license to use it for a limited amount of time. Mm-hmm. And after they saw how much that Battlefield, maybe it wasn't underperforming, but it just wasn't performing as well as it could have been.
Mm-hmm. Or normally does.
Yeah. So they've decided to essentially save an IP that they do own, as opposed to an IP that could be pulled out from underneath them at any moment, basically.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, DICE was built around Battlefield. That's the thing. So it would be really, as like a business decision from their part, it would be really weird for them to essentially stop working on or not save the franchise that essentially helped create and form the studio.
Exactly.
And as Ethan says, like the Star Wars license could be pulled from underneath them like at any point, really. Mm-hmm. So it would be weird if they tried to carry on with the Battlefront and not save the Battlefield franchise, because eventually, if and when the Star Wars license is no longer with EA, then where's the Battlefield franchise to keep DICE going? You know, it may, like with the end of Battlefront 2 to save Battlefield essentially with this next game, it makes complete sense on their part. Like, yeah, it sucks, but it makes absolute sense. And I think if we do, you know, based on the popularity of how Battlefront 2 was, especially towards the end, I think when the next Battlefield comes out next year, I think there's absolutely a chance that we'll see a Battlefront 3, you know, a couple of years down the line.
Yeah. I reckon a Battlefield 3 will be close to, if not probably the final game of EA's Star Wars license. At least I have a feeling they might renew it for a few more years.
I mean, I think they would. That leads perfectly into another question that we've got in terms of the Star Wars license and a possible Battlefront 3 is that license. They have an exclusive license with a little bit of exceptions because we've got Traveler's Tales over there, which is Warner Brothers, but they're still able to use the license. But they kind of got grandfathered in, and they're on a different level. But we've got the exclusive license with EA on producing Star Wars games with their development companies, and that is supposed to expire in 2023. So we've got pretty much 2 more years, 3 full years, maybe if you count it from January, January 2021.
Basically one dev cycle, essentially.
Exactly.
We have left.
The thing is there's more than just one studio at EA. They have a whole production suite. When you think about the games that we've gotten produced so far and the companies that have been producing them, they're just a drop in the bucket compared to the wide world of EA game studios.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, EA have got a great, they've got so many different studios, great studios under their belt, and it was really nice to see. It was obviously great to see DICE do what they did with the Battlefront franchise, but also to see Respawn go into kind of a path they haven't really gone with yet. Obviously, with Fallen Order
and
as
knocked it
opposed
out of
to
the
Titanfall
park.
games. Yeah, and they did a cracking job with that. Like we've got BioWare with Star Wars: The Old Republic, which actually obviously came out before the license was given to EA.
But controversial
you know,
opinion here, guys. I don't think that's the same level of production as something like Battlefront. It's not personally. I know lots of people enjoy that game. It's just not what floats my boat. I wouldn't say it's like a full AAA title in terms of support, and it's been put on the wayside, really.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree with you. Yeah, it's just one of those things that I think, from someone who has played it, like it's definitely one of those games that I really enjoy, and it's something I really want to see in a more photoreal kind of modern version of. I think I'd love to see something like that come out for like next gen consoles. But
definitely.
EA have got a load of great studios under their belt. I mean, Motive with their first proper title brought out Squadrons, which is like me the best experience, one of the best Star Wars experiences I've ever had. And they can use this, they can go and use these. And I mean, Squadrons sold 1.1 million copies in October alone. And I think, so financially, it makes sense that EA, I think, do keep the license, post 2023. So I think, like Ethan said, we've kind of got at least, one dev cycle left. But I think, could it be extended, then we could see a Battlefront 3 and, many more Star Wars games released and then hopefully supported for a long period of time.
Yeah. I mean, I've always wondered about the specifics of the contract as well. Like, does the contract end date just stipulate that they can't release any games after that point, or can they just, or do they?
I've heard rumors that they can still support it through the license,
right?
But again, that's rumors. Nothing's confirmed on that front.
Because if they were allowed to develop, like actively produce Star Wars games up until the final date, and then release the game after the contract is over, that would be good. I mean, like, if only we knew the specifics of this contract.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, because it's kind of like
the dark side.
Yeah, it's in the, I think if it's like, they can keep, like, if they did like no longer have it like as of the end of 2023, but they release a Battlefront in 2023, as long as they can like develop that post that and just post 2023 and keep updating the game with content and stuff like that, that would obviously be amazing. Which I think is kind of the point you were getting to, Ethan. But because I feel like it wouldn't make like sense at all, especially if they release a multiplayer title in 2023 but then the license expires and like we can't update it anymore no matter what. Like it to me, that just would not make any sense whatsoever.
I'm sure EA would have like worked it out with Disney quite early on as well.
Well, Andrew Wilson at EA Play Live, like in an investors call, like after the actual show, said specifically that they want to double down on Star Wars games. Obviously, that's not necessarily we will, but
that's definitely PR speak. Because we haven't seen any more pushes on that front. They're gonna just continue the same amount of momentum, I would assume, because we don't have any clear announced titles. Maybe that just means we won't cancel any more studios.
Yeah. Oh, well, I was just thinking, like, maybe it's one of those things that, like, they're focusing on, like, they want to double down on Star Wars games, but obviously we haven't heard anything yet because they wanted to focus on Squadrons, and Squadrons is the main focus right now. And then perhaps next year, either Star Wars Celebration, if that is a proper thing, whether it's online or not, or just at EA Play again, whether that's online or not, then they can kind of show off more stuff, unveil things a bit more, and maybe actually talk a bit more into what their plans are for it.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they decided to give Battlefront to a different EA studio.
I think
just
they
so
should.
that DICE can focus on Battlefield. Because
DICE cannot. We've seen it throughout both Battlefront 2015 and Battlefront 2's life cycle that they are not a two-game studio, really. They struggle with keeping two games going. Like when Battlefront 2 was having support, like really good support, Battlefield 5 was really struggling, and vice versa. I think they should give it to another studio or start a specific studio specifically for Battlefront. Like that's just this this company or this studio is specifically on creating Battlefront content, making the game, and then supporting it. And maybe they bring some of the people that were involved in the higher levels of exactly. Bring back Dennis.
It's got to be Dennis.
Bring back Dennis.
Just Dennis is a one-man army. He can just do it himself.
Well, that's the thing is though. You raise a really good point because so many of the developers that I follow on Twitter from Battlefront 2, especially Ben, like continue to show their sadness about Battlefront 2 ending and their wish to be able to keep on making content for it. So, I really think that the community like clearly want a Battlefront 3. I mean, there was that whole Battlefront 2 petition going on for ages, and now
and now to make Battlefront 3.
And now it's also for Battlefront 3, but like the community are continuing to show their support and love for the Battlefront franchise. The developers clearly want to be working on Battlefront again. And, if EA are going to be in any position to be able to do that, then I don't see why they wouldn't, because, the Battlefront franchise is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest franchise within Star Wars gaming. So, I feel like it wouldn't make any sense to not have a big focus on that, especially when
my dream lineup is
there's just so
Battlefront
much
3, KOTOR 3. Could you imagine the amount of community support if they were like, oh yeah, we're going to make these 2 highly requested games? Like EA would become like the golden child in terms of video games instead of like the one despised.
What if, so continuing with this trend of new eras being added to Star Wars games as time goes forward, especially Battlefront. What if Battlefront 3 had the Old Republic, High Republic, all of that old Legends EU stuff?
My tummy rumbles for this.
I mean, if they were going to make a Battlefront 3, it would have to. I've seen a lot of talk about it online, people speculating on what it would be, and there's a couple ways they can do it. They can go into the Old Republic. They can go into an era that hasn't really been explored to its full extent, or they can just add all of the eras. And I have a problem if they added everything from the past 2 games into a third one, like a Battlefront Ultimate in terms of like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, where they just added everything, is we get into the same problems of Battlefront 2. It was just too big of a project. It was spread too widely. And I think if they want to be successful and make a really good game that they can support, it needs to be a lot smaller than Battlefront 2 did. And it runs into the issues like, why would I pay $60 for this game when the second game that came out, the one that you're replacing, had more content? And I paid $60 for that one. Like, you get into that issue. But people need to get over it.
Yeah, I mean, going to your point of kind of the whole Smash Bros. Ultimate, kind of Battlefront Ultimate thing, I would like to see content from Battlefront 2 and even Battlefront 2015 come into a Battlefront 3. Not all of it, of course, but I'd love to see just some of the maps of more like the iconic maps. So I've already spoken about this before, but like things like Outpost Delta and Outpost Beta, they're from the Twilight Company books, and they were in both games. So I'd love to see them make their way into it, along with perhaps Echo Base, like a new Echo Base map.
Yeah.
Things like Administrator's Palace,
Jabba's Palace,
that again, Jabba's Palace as well. I can't remember everything I noted down, but the more like iconic locations. So like none of the Endor maps from. Dude,
honestly,
I will die on that hill.
Bad.
This episode of Uplink Podcast is brought to you by It's Not a Tiny House Podcast, a podcast all about alternative living and making it happen. Definitely go give them a listen. Link will be in the description of this episode. You can find it wherever you find podcasts.
When I'm thinking of maps to bring forward from the old Battlefront 2015 and Battlefront 2, I think about the maps and they all feel iconic to me. But maybe that's just because I've played them a lot.
I mean, when I say iconic, I just mean like they're seen in the movies or other media, basically. So, like, I mean, yeah, it's like, to me, all of the maps, they're iconic and all that, but it's a case of, has this appeared?
Yeah, is it nostalgia just from like all of the fun that we had on those maps, or is it these are iconic? I personally, Solist and Nine Num were like some of my favorite parts of parts of Star Wars before Battlefront came out.
Yeah.
Because it's mentioned all throughout Star Wars, and now we get to see that planet that's mentioned throughout the movies, throughout the books especially, and we got to see that in full action. I also think the maps are prettier in Battlefront 2015 than in Battlefront 2 for some reason.
Absolutely, yeah. I think in Battlefront 2015 they were really pushing with the photogrammetry stuff, weren't they? Like, they were coming up with all these new processes and stuff, and they just basically wanted to use them as much as possible, and so you ended up with all these really beautiful, like, super like hyper realistic landscapes. And
I was playing Skirmish on the Xbox Series X the couple days ago, and oh my gosh, playing on Solist, whew, so pretty.
I think Battlefront 2 suffered, like, because of its scale in terms of the like, graphically it's better than Battlefront 1 from a technical perspective, but visually I'd say it's a little bit rougher around the edges.
It looks good, but it's a little, as Kira says in Solo, it's like, it looks good, a little rough around the edges, but good.
Battlefront 2 is the Han Solo of Star Wars games.
Yeah. So what I've just put in the chat here that we can see, so it's like I'm working on this big like Excel spreadsheet with my brother of Battlefront 3 content we want. So we've got like Tatooine, for example. So the maps I've got listed is Mos Eisley, Mos Espa, Mos Pelgo, Judland Wastes, and Jabba's Palace. So 3 old maps, 2 new maps, and like kind of based on their scale. So Mos Eisley, Mos Espa, Judland Waste, and Jabba's Palace could be big maps. Jabba's Palace and Mos Pelgo small maps, and kind of where I think they would be able to fit in with regards to honestly, launch and post-launch.
Mos Pelgo would make a great Heroes versus Villains map.
It really
That's
would.
what I was thinking.
I think like just Blast, just a small map, Blast, Heroes versus Villains, something like that. It would work really well for
open like bloodbath street in the middle. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. So so Mos Eisley is obviously an iconic location within the films, and I think that's something I'd love to see. And we had it in Battlefront 2, where it's kind of one of those things that it's essentially 95% accurate to the films, essentially. So why go and redesign that map completely from the ground up, and why not just go back to what we had before? With
How do you feel about them tweaking old maps?
I don't have an issue with tweaking. Like they tweaked Naboo, Camino, and everything like that for Supremacy. I think if tweaking the maps is necessary to work for other game modes, that is like go for it. Because
I mean more than just like, because I know in Capital Supremacy they did a few things, like they added like a few. Like on Camino, like crash speeders, and like destroyed those droids, the big ones that come out of the water. So you could like walk up onto different platforms and stuff.
Yep.
But I mean, like slightly deeper changes, like slight layout changes, new corridors, removed corridors, stuff like that.
I mean, if it suits the gameplay, yes. That's the key thing here. One of the problems with Battlefront 2015 was at points, it felt like they were pushing canon over gameplay, and some of the content that they brought in struggled from that. But if it suits the gameplay, I mean, add whatever is needed. If it makes the game better, do it.
Yeah, of course. It's one of those things that if it's not necessary, don't do it. But if it's like, okay, well, this corridor, you've kind of got too much of a straight path here that a sniper can look down. Okay, well, we'll remove that corridor and we'll divert it somewhere else so that the sniper's line of sight isn't as big, for example, And I think, if they need to make changes, then I'm all for it. I would love to personally see some of the older maps return into this, like a big new game.
They had to change the, on Jabba's Palace, as say you're playing Heroes versus Villains, and you're the heroes. So on the left side, you have those little tiny small tunnels. When they brought that over to Battlefront 2, they had to raise the height of the doors because Grievous wouldn't fit through them.
Amazing.
Which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But you guys bring up a good point, is the strength that EA has currently. They've been working with the license. It'll be 10 years when that license expires. And something that they're able to do and that we're talking about right now is bringing over that old content. They did that for Battlefront 2. If there was a license expiration, it broadened up to where you can just apply as a game studio to create a game, which I personally think is the better option than just limiting it to one company. They have the relationship built up with EA. They have the back catalog and library of content that they've created, and a new company would have to, from the ground up, establish that relationship with EA if they wanted to bring over content, they would have to establish a relationship with EA. They would have to establish that relationship with Lucasfilm, which is historically pretty difficult to work with at times, especially if you want to bring in new content, unless you're a mobile game.
Logistically speaking, I feel like because this is kind of always the point I've made, is that if EA was to lose the license and it was to go to someone else, then logistically speaking, I don't feel like that makes sense, because as you say, they have to build up all of these relationships from the ground up, and they have to, prepare everything that they need to do as a company itself to be able to get to work on these things.
And just like when EA got the license, that could take up to 3 or 4 years to fully get up to speed before it's even... And even then, after
which it is very impressive
years,
that Battlefront 2015 was established and released when it was, considering they got the license in 2013 and it came out in 2015.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, EA had been working with Lucasfilm before that anyway because of Star Wars The Old Republic, so they already had a relationship there. So, because of that relationship, I think it definitely made it easier to work with Lucasfilm. But then even still, like with Battlefront 2015, it was DICE working on it. It was a different studio, so it wasn't BioWare. So there are still these logistical, more business side of things that still need to be built up ready so that they can do this. But it's even easier because you've got EA who already work with Lucasfilm to be able to do that. But that's always been my point. Like, logistically speaking, it makes EA to at least have the license, whether it's exclusive or not is another matter. I think if it's not exclusive, then that's great, because other companies will get a chance to make Star Wars games.
I mean,
and
the golden era
competition
of Star Wars games was in an era where it wasn't limited to one company that handled all of that. It was many companies were able to either handpicked by LucasArts or had an idea, they pitched it to LucasArts. LucasArts said, yes, this is a good idea, we'd love that in our catalog, and they went and made it.
That also had the downside of the golden era had obviously lots of great games, but it also had lots of terrible games.
True,
and that's the one downside to that.
Yeah,
it's true, but you're gonna get crappy games no matter what happens with the license. It's just gonna work. That's how games are done.
I think another thing as well is that competition drives innovation as well. So it's one of those things that it could be it could be healthy for the EA game studios to be like, oh well, hey, these people over at Ubisoft, for example, are now making a Star Wars game and stuff like that.
There's a reason we only have 4 games, with several of them canceled for actually release, is because EA doesn't feel a need to release a game every year to be competitive with any other company, because it'd be competitive with itself.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to someone, and they were saying that apparently, another reason why EA have the license is also because no one else really wanted to go for it. I don't know how.
I mean, that's
true
fair.
That is, but
it is a big and daunting thing to tackle.
Yeah, exactly. Star Wars. That's the thing. It's such a big IP, and if you screw it up, you're going to get you're going to be told about it. So
yeah, I think it was
it's a huge challenge. So.
We had Andrew Bombastic on the podcast. I was saying, if I was a game development company under EA and I was asked to do a Star Wars game, I'd be like, You guys canceled Visceral, and they're no longer a thing. I don't know about this.
Yeah. No,
I think the one thing I like about EA is that they're not afraid to cut the cord on a project that is not going right.
Yeah.
I mean, like you obviously
That's a good
have
thing and a bad thing.
Yeah, like you have some standout cases like Anthem, for example. But from what I remember reading, they didn't quite know about the situation until it was too late, so they were forced to release it. But most of the time, like when you look at all the Star Wars games that EA has cancelled, like all of them had trouble behind the scenes anyway, relating to the studio and not necessarily EA itself.
Yeah, I mean, with the Visceral game, they were saying that Frostbite was was really difficult to use, with one developer saying that had they made the game in Unreal Engine, they probably would have shipped it.
Yeah. Well, that was my tweet as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, you tweeted. Actually, yeah, we've had this conversation before. And that's the thing. It's like, but I think it was, the studio or EA basically essentially forcing them to use Frostbite because I guess because it is their engine, so it's kind of
they don't get forced to use it. They get the option of using it. And look at Respawn, they chose not to do it.
But they did have to fight tooth and nail for that, and there's a reason that they were able to keep it.
They don't have to. That's the thing. That's a misconception, is that EA doesn't force people or doesn't push people that hard to use, Frostbite. That the reason that a lot of studios go for it is because they're given a budget, or at least they fight for a budget with EA. And yeah, it's free, basically. It doesn't cost anything.
Yeah,
whereas
they don't have
if
to
you
license
could use Unreal Engine, you have to license it and so on.
But you do have Respawn saying in a few interviews that if they weren't using Unreal Engine, that they wouldn't have been able to create the game that they created. Which it's fair, because that's what they work with. And someone like DICE, who are able to use Unreal or Frostbite to great effect, and are very efficient with it because they've used it for so long.
That's another thing that the general gaming population doesn't really understand, is that studios are often not built around an engine, but a lot of the systems and pipelines within the studio are built around the engine that they use the most, or that they started using, which is why a lot of studios really struggle to switch over to new engines.
Yeah,
like even from like a clerical perspective, all of their issue tracking and stuff is built around, say, Frostbite as opposed to Unreal, which makes that transition so much harder and so much more expensive and resource intensive.
Definitely. So there's a lot. Again, it's game development, so it's super complicated all around the board. There are intricacies that we won't know of until 20 years later, when one of the developers is like, oh yeah, now I'm out of my NDA and I can actually talk about this. So
I can't wait for that Battlefront retrospective.
Oh dude, yes.
DICE employees.
I would love to be able to host that.
Absolutely. Even with the stuff that I'm not going to say any of it, but all the stuff that some people know already, that alone is enough for a few episodes of retrospective interviews.
Definitely. Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting as we move forward and we see more content, because right now we do have actually a good lineup. We've got Squadrons that came out this year. We've got Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga coming out next year, and then we've got Jedi Fallen Order 2 coming out the following year after that, 2022. So we have, if you count this year, 3 years of consecutive Star Wars, which can't really be said in any of the other years, really. We won't be getting any movies, but we will be getting some video games. So hopefully we'll be able to carry that torch.
Some shows as well along the way.
Exactly. And I think going forward, we'll see more of a focus on that, because it's easier, less weight to it. We see all the controversies around the movies that have been coming out, and those controversies some of them are there with some of the casting choices and their political perspectives, but overall we have a lot better slate. In the video game side of things, there's little to no controversy unless you count the loot box stuff.
I mean, this is a really exciting time for Star Wars. Like, as you said, I don't think Disney is too keen on
We will
making Star Wars
continue.
films right now.
We will continue to get Star Wars. It just makes too much money.
But like, there's never been a point in time where Star Wars has been explored in so many other formats and types of media. You know, you've always had comic books and books, but never quite as many as we have now. We've never had TV shows.
Yeah.
We had, you know, the original Clone Wars and stuff, but that was small scale up until, you know, the final half of that entire show, where it blew up it massively in popularity and became like a big budget, like, spectacle thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's just a really exciting time. We've got the Cassian Andor show in production, or at least I think as of today it's in production. Is it?
Well, they started filming like a good month or two ago. I'm pretty sure.
Right, okay.
Because,
or is it the Kenobi one?
So the Kenobi one starts production in January.
Right.
Diego Luna confirmed, like, literally on the Jimmy Kimmel show last night that they
right, yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
They're filming, but like there was this whole thing, I think back in September about. So Ethan, you'll probably know this, but like when the UK government said that like high budget TV shows and films can start filming again, so they were like Batman, you know, things like Batman can start filming again.
Things that bring us money.
Yeah, the Cassian Andor show was mentioned alongside with that. So.
Things that the government is giving tax money for
Yes.
in the UK.
Yeah. But yeah, the Cassian Andor show and Batman were the two highlighted productions that were mentioned back then. So I think it's been in like filming for the last month and a half or so. So yeah, and then we've got the Kenobi show. But you're absolutely right though, like there are so many different types of media that we're getting with Star Wars now, and it is super exciting. I mean, the next film's like 2023 or something like that. So we've got a while until the next film, but
Yeah.
until then we've got the Mandalorian, Obi-Wan show, Cassian show. There's a rumored Boba Fett TV show as well in production now,
Which makes sense.
we've then also got all the books and the comics, you know, exploring the High Republic era,
Huge
the
world
games.
of
Like
books.
it's insane, like how much stuff is going to be coming over the next few years.
Excellent. It's a great time to be a Star Wars fan. And thank you guys so
100%.
much for coming on the podcast. This has been an absolute blast. Always love having you guys on the podcast.
Absolutely, yeah.
Always a pleasure.
No,
Yeah.
I love coming on this podcast. And every time you ask, I'm always super excited to say yes.
But yeah, like whether it's the podcast or like a Legions project or like Wayfinder related, I'm always just like, I want to do it. Like even if I'm going to be swamped with uni work or whatever, I'll be like, I want to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so fun.
It's a great community we've got going. And stay tuned to the Twitter, all things Uplink, and keep an eye out on Wayfinder. We've got some things coming along the pipeline there. But as always, thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you.